Welcome to the Praxis Beyond the Obscure podcast, and we have a third time returning guest, which I think is the record now. So you're the record holder on this podcast. You're the third returning guest. That's a record. You also have the most views on any video / podcast on the channel. So hey, you're the goat of the podcast, the greatest of all time so far.
I guess I'm first out the gate, so usually the people watch the first episode first. But that's very kind of you to say.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. So the last 2 we covered Enochian, and we covered I believe the first time we covered like the Aethers and a bit about your story, and then we covered Liber Loga, and I figured this time we'd cover the Heptarchia Mystica, which is a system that is obviously Loga is probably the rarest one that people cover. It's the least understood. It's probably the most obscure, right? And the Aethers being the most well-known, most well-practiced probably. And what would you say, the Heptarchia, that's probably like in the middle? It's also very rare and less explored. But
I'd say it's like, it's certainly the easiest when it comes to difficulty, which is almost an odd thing to say. But really, in terms of like, the Aethers, there are 30 of them. Whereas, if you're doing on any given day, of the week, you technically would only be doing a king and a prince of that day. Mm-hmm. It's possible that there's a little bit of a coda that I'll add to that when we get into the technique later, but there's really not as much to it, to getting it to work and getting the results that you want. And it is much more of a results kind of system that you would be playing around with than, for example, let's say the Aethers, which is much more about, okay, get this vision and get this like change in consciousness level. Now, that's not to say that I don't think that you can't get, let's go and throw a triple negative in. I think you can definitely get you can get some help, let's put it that way, with the kings of the Heptarchia system when you're doing, it's like it all sort of feeds into itself. That's what Enochian is really good at. That's part of where the juice is, I think, is that once you really start understanding the system, you can use one part of the system to amplify the other one. And it was just like a couple hours before I came on, I literally was scrying an Aether, and the angels were like, okay, you have these additional tools, you got to use them. So and that I would say that goes for the Heptarchia as well as the Aethers and all of that. You can definitely use them in conjunction with each other if you have some time. So, and I had some time tonight, so.
Oh, for sure. So what would you define, how would you define the Heptarchia Mystica? Because it was the first system, I believe, that was revealed, right? Like with the furniture came this system, and then later Loga was second, am I right? And then the Aethers okay.
Yeah, the Aethers, yes. So like the way it worked was that if you go back to like some of the manuscripts, and you can check out Sloan 3188 is the name of the manuscript. That's one of the first things, and it's sort of a tricky opening because I think Edward Kelly comes in and he's the scryer to John Dee. If you're just picking this episode to start now, he comes in and he gets this receives this seal from Uriel. And then it's almost like the next day or next working, very soon thereafter, they're told, no, that was a fake angel that you were talking to, and that's a bad seal, you shouldn't use it. And then right after that, they lead into this mystical heptarchy, the Heptarchia Mystica. And so it's interesting just taking a step back, as putting on a more academic hat, thinking about it, like, let's contextualize this a little bit. So John Dee, and he's rubbing elbows with royalty, with Queen Elizabeth, at the time just Queen Elizabeth, and since modern days it's Queen Elizabeth I. But he's very much got this mindset of a servant to the court and royalty and all of that. So what of course comes through is something that's culturally bound, which is, okay, what did England have back in the day? Well, they had the famous 7 kingdoms that then were united under King Arthur. In fact, he named, I think it was his oldest son, he named Arthur Dee. So you can tell a little bit of where his mind was. And so it's not surprising. And I think you had shared the podcast episode of Esoterica with Aaron Leach, where they were discussing about how this was a little bit of a culturally bound transmission / reception. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se, because the point is that we got this thing that has 7 elements to it. If you just strip away a lot of this, I guess in Marxism you would call it the superstructure. You know, a Marxist theory, you would say, okay, strip away the superstructure and let's just look at the foundation. You get this thing with 7, you know, of this class of angel, and then another 7 that are working in tandem with that other set. So at any rate, but let's use the language of the time. Let's go back to, because you know you miss some of the majesty and the magic of it if you don't use that term. So so yeah, it comes through, and it's basically exactly what it sounds like. 7 kings, you know, seven rulers, if you're going to go back to the idea of arche, you know, leaders. And then so the 7 kings, and then there are 7 princes who are ministers to them. And then there are, I believe, I want to say 42 ministers underneath each of those, but those are all just based on certain times. And Aaron Leach does a nice job summarizing that in his essential Enochian grimoire. So a little bit what it's about from the recording's going okay?
Oh, it
Okay.
kind of blocked out for about 5 seconds, but
okay.
yeah, you
That's all right.
you left off that it was kind of summarizing Aaron Leach's essential Enochian grimoire, the
Yes.
kings, the princes, and then the ministers under them.
Yeah, and there are ministers, and I believe there are only like 6 actual ministers, and it's not, you know, I haven't really worked with those in particular, although if you really wanted to get into it, you know, you can definitely, there's always opportunity to drill down in Enochian. But what you can do is you can actually go based on planetary hour within a day, and then their names are identical, except it sort of shifts. 1 letter from the back, I think, goes to the front, or vice versa. I forget which. But you can actually, you know, call on them. I don't really do that. I kind of take more of the Scott Stenwick approach of call on the king at the right, on the king and prince on the right day, and then call on the king and prince at the right hour, following the order of planets that matches the instance of creation on the holy table in that order, as opposed to the Chaldean order, which is a whole other astrological thing. So, but yeah, you can definitely, you can go that far. You can ask them in particular if you really wanted this particular effect. Please go ahead and show up, minister, and also help out with this task that I have. And I'm sure the angels will appreciate the extra effort if you are going so far as to call on the princes, on the ministers themselves, according to the right name set, according to the planetary hour. That's hardcore, but you can do it all nowadays pretty easily with the internet. I mean, there are planetary hours calendars. You just Google that and you're good to go.
Exactly. Why do you think someone should work with this system? It's obviously less worked with, like most people, they get into the Aethers or the Great Ship or the Watchtower. Do you think that, I think essentially it is an easier system. As far in terms of, it's more straightforward. It's easier to work with,
Yeah.
What do you see the benefits of working with this system?
Yeah, I think the reason why people may not work with that is that you sort of have to, well, let me take a little step back and I'll just start tapping on the window of astrology. And it's not something that everybody's really familiar with. I mean, we all kind of know our sun signs, and we know that the sun and the moon are all kind of, but we don't, we don't necessarily get into that degree of complexity about what certain things are associated with what. So if you look at a book like, let's just for me, it's semi-standard, a book like Liber 777 with all of those, massive correspondences and stuff like that, you really can get into, you can pretty quickly find yourself lost in this sea of stuff you got to remember, and stuff that's associated with a particular planet, and what's the difference between that and a Sephiroth, and the Sephiroth. But so I think that's a bit of a hurdle for people. But in Stenwick's, and I usually will alternate between the EEG that I mentioned in Scott Stenwick's Mastering the Mystical Heptarchy, just as a quick reference guide, because I don't have stuff memorized, sorry,
Yeah.
the brain's
That's
only
a
got so
great
much
book,
stuff in it.
by the way. That's a very good
What
book.
It is a very good book, yes.
Mhm.
So shout out to Scott Stenwick.
Mhm.
But he lays out not only the powers of the kings and princes in this system, as they were received by John Dee and Edward Kelly, but also as would relate to Liber 777, which is, and I'm not going to say that this is entirely everything that that book is about, but a lot of that is straight up, here's Cornelius Agrippa, who lifted that from several sources that he didn't always give credit to. And then here's also some other stuff that, Crowley found during his travels as he was trying to pull this stuff together. So Hindu deities and stuff like that. So all of this is to say that if you don't have those powers associated with those planets, and you don't have the powers associated with the Sephiroth that those planets rule, you're not going to see as much of a benefit straight up. Whereas with the watchtowers, it's like, you want the angels of secret discovery, you want the angels of hidden of precious golden precious stones. Boom, it's right there. They tell you right there. You don't need to have this extra intellectual overhead of all of that knowledge. You don't need to be able to look that up and have all of this long list of correspondences that just comes tumbling out of your mind. You don't need any of that. But so that's, I think, why it's not used as much. But it's, in terms of using it, it's actually relatively easy. I mean, I just use basically again, I'll just go straight to there are different ways you could do it. You could certainly always petition the angels with a simple prayer, but of course you would want to do the same thing, the usual: activate your furniture, Enochian furniture if you have it. And I think it was it Shoemaker who you mentioned, who suggested calls 1 or calls 1 and 2. I've been using both of those now, and I've been finding that they amplify everything that I do. So I think,
Right.
I enjoy learning from other people as much as possible,
Right.
and it's certainly deepened the practice as I go along.
Sure. Yeah, I like using calls 1 and 2 before working most things in Enochian, like especially the
Yes.
Heptarchia. And
Yes.
I think in Stenwick, in his book, I think he says, God, I'm forgetting now. I think it's like 1 for evocation, 2 for invocation, or something along those lines. But
Yeah.
using both together can be a general amplifier,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it kind of goes along with his operant field. And generally speaking, I think that once you realize that, there is no, take a more Buddhist approach,
yeah.
that, there's really not much of a difference between inside, outside. There's no, why worry about that? Well, why not turn up the, volume on both of those and make it work for you? So I think that's why both of those, but why using both of those together in conjunction seems to help, because it's like if there's an external barrier or an internal barrier, they're overcome, or if there's an external amplifier to what it's helping you, or an internal one, those are also worked up. So that's just a working theory that I have.
Right. So
Yep.
your template for working with it, like, can you explain a little bit about how you start? Like, what do you use?
Sure.
The second call, and what's your general process?
Yeah. So what I'll do is, usually, okay, I'm gonna take the have everybody peek behind the curtain here. I don't as well as I should. If my week is relatively clear, and I know that it's not a time pressure thing, which it has not been in this age of COVID, when I'm literally having to call on Prince Blisdone of Mercury, saying, please help out so and so's family with COVID, this family with that family. So far, by the way, that has worked very well, in terms of shortening the length of the illness and all of that. Always go to your physicians first, kids. I'm not a doctor. I'm just a magic guy. And why do you, if you believe in magic, great. If not, whatever. But I always have to put that caveat in there. But at any rate, so what I will do is, usually that has not been the case. So what do I do? Well, it's called a heptarchy, but that's a little misleading because there's actually an eighth king and an eighth prince known as Karmara and Hagonel. And actually, in my working with Karmara, whose name, and I think they say in one of the manuscripts that it goes to
they're kind of
his
like
name in the heavens.
Like the chiefs of the system, right?
Yeah, they're kind of like a high king maybe and a high prince.
Right.
But you know, but just really quickly, I think in one of the manuscripts it says that he's Marmara, known in heaven as Marmara. And what I found is, just as an aside, when working with the zodiacal kings, I think their preference is to work with the Marmara form. And my sense is that he actually rules over the zodiacal kings as well. So that's a whole like tangent, because I know I've got the whole zodiacal table and all of that. But one of the things I wanted to, so anyway, what I'll do is, if I need to work and it's like, look, I need this today. I know that you're the planet, you're the prince over Mars, the Martial stuff, you know, Prince of Mars should be done on a Tuesday. Sorry, it's Thursday, you know, but I need this and I need it now, please. So of course you always say please, you know, always be polite and all of that and respectful, but I will call on Karmara and Hagonel. Usually I just call them on both of them. And it's the thing that seems to make them the high king and prince, at least one of the things, is that they have this power to switch around who can work on what day. And I found this when I was working Jebafal last year, that at a certain point, just long story short, the things that I was in my mind thinking had to line up were not quite lining up. And if things are not making sense to you about the Enochian system, that's actually one of the things that Karmara is good for, is that he can help you figure that out. And because he's good at like realigning what's going on in your mind, he does the same thing with the kings and princes. He literally realigns when they're active for you. And yeah, so what I'll do is I will call on them, usually to just get it, usually because it's just life, you know, you need this thing and it's an off day. And then what I will do once I've called on them, I will also call on the king and prince associated with the power that I want, king or prince. You can always call on both. Obviously, they're going to be aligned, but you can call on them and then ask them for whatever power they're associated with. So if it's something like political ascendancy, you know, you can call on Binapur and Budmono. If you're going to call on, if for whatever reason you know, let's say you were going to hunt for buried treasure, well, there's always the, you know, angels associated. That's a long running gag, by the way, about Dean Kelly. They're always hunting for buried treasure. But at any rate, they're literally in the watchtowers, they're angels of gold and precious stones. But one of the kings, King Benaspol, who's associated with Mercury, that's one of his powers is the earth and its bowels, you know. And there's an astrological significance to, like, why is Babalel associated with water? Well, because he's the king of Mars. Well, Mars has the most dignity when it's in the sign of Scorpio, which is a water sign. Why is Mercury so strong in Virgo? Well, that's where Mercury is exalted. Or why does Mercury have so much power of Earth? You know, the Benaspol. Oh, well, that's because Mercury has, you know, is exalted and domiciled. It has this extra power, this oomph, when it's in the sign of Virgo. And interestingly, when it comes to Venus, King Balagon and Prince Bagonel, when they are domiciled in Libra. But it's funny talking to other astrologers. They say, well, Venus is more powerful when it's in Taurus, but I don't think Enochian, the angels feel the same way about that. So it's kind of interesting. It is domiciled when it's in Libra, which is one of the stronger things that you want a planet to be. And maybe it's just its general uniting feature, and Earth isn't quite as good for that. But anyway, that's kind of, we're veering into astro talk here. So
it's all good. It's all good. So you basically start out with you work with Well, actually, do you start out with the calls first then? Like,
Yes. Yeah. I'll start.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'll start out with the calls 1 and 2, and then I'll just use, Stenwick's method of that he describes in his book. I'll just use that. And I happen to use the Christian version. He also has a thelemic version if you're into the thelema thing. But I will go ahead and put the seals associated with that, with the king and prince. I'll put those under my feet, and I've just found, that
Another question. When you
yes,
use the seals, do you put
yeah,
them? I believe Stenwick puts them together, right? As far as like the sigils for the prince and the
yes,
king, he puts
and the
them
king.
together. And I think some other people they'll make separate seals. You do you put them all in one?
I put them all. I pulled them. I just followed
Okay.
his technique. It's just easier that way.
Yeah.
I don't. There are times in which I have gone back to the. I'm probably very frustrating to certain very deep purists, because I will go back to the source material sometimes to check out this, that, or the other thing. And for example, when I made the banners, the way that I made the banners is really following what is associated with the tabula racenza, although D never made, there were literally, there was an error compounded by another error. So if you were making the banners as he had them written, you would never realize that, okay, really this is probably what it should be, and he never fixed that. So it's a whole thing. So I'm frustrating in some ways, but I also know that it's like, if you've ever played Othello the way it was marketed in the US, it was a minute to learn, a lifetime to master. That's what it's like with Enochian. It's like a minute to like an hour to just hear a call, have a thing if somebody else is like introducing you to it, but it's a lifetime to like really get in. And I just I'm not perfect, and I can't, like, sometimes, like when I'm copying Loga, I'll go straight to the source docs and I'll do that, but I don't always. I trust to as best I can, unless I find something overriding that in the source materials, I'll do that. So what I'll do is, I'll say calls 1 and 2, and I will go ahead and put the seals, just like you said. He has the name of the king and the prince in there, and he has the names of the 6 ministers, and not accounting for the fact that, of course, it shifts, 1 letter after, according to the planetary hours. But yeah, then I'll go ahead and I'll make the same call that he has in his book, and I'll just, then once I've done that, I'll say, please, oh, noble prince, blah, 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 here's the things that or noble, right noble king. I'll say, please, this thing, the other thing, and just say it from the heart. You can have it written up in advance, nothing wrong with that, but I usually just, I know what I want. Stenwick's big on what you want the angel to do, but also telling them, having an injunction against ways that you do not want it to happen. And I think that's a good habit. It's very rare with Enochian, but it's not unheard of. And I'm saying this from my experience, where the message isn't quite, or the outcome isn't quite the way you were hoping or thinking it would be. It's rare, and you have to watch out for that. So it's a good habit in general. And the angels, they're just going to go based on what you have, and they're going to do what they think is right. And if it doesn't go according to the way that you have it in your very specific terms of do this, but without doing this, then that will actually give you more information about why it's not working, as opposed to things blew up. Why did this happen? Okay. Oh, okay, because I didn't give them specifics on that. So then you can get into, you can sort of, so the reason I'm getting into this is, like, this can actually guide you on your path better, right? Because if you're doing something and you want to know why it went wrong, is it because I was sloppy? Or is it because, okay, this thing is not working out, now I can actually go back to the angels and say, so you did it this way, or you didn't let this thing happen, why? And please help me understand. And they're pretty good about telling you.
Very good, very good. So it sounds like, do you use any ceremonial magic techniques in terms of, like, some people that might work with this, they see, obviously it's a planetary system. Some people might say you're working on a Thursday, might do, like a pentagram or hexagram rituals. Do you do anything like that, or do you work strictly with the Enochian sort of
Yeah.
like a semi-deep purist approach, right?
Yeah, back in the day, I used to do more of the, and almost everybody who writes about this now, they will reintroduce the lesser ritual of the hexagram or the greater one even. I used to do that. Nowadays, it's just like you're pretty much working with the angels themselves. Now, if you're not used to this, or if you're not, it's a good thing to know how to do. I do recommend learning that if you're just starting out, you're not familiar with what is a planetary influence, what is a Sephirotic one, and I'll just as an aside here note that's the Sephirotic influence of the kings. I think that should not be underestimated. That's something Stenwick puts in there, and one of the I'm just combining different people's views here just so I can try to be as forthcoming as possible with this. I think that if you are doing, let's say, the Aethers, and Jason Louv talks about this as an initiation into Bina. Well, Bina is complementary with, or quote unquote ruled by the planet Saturn. We have now a king associated with the planet Saturn, but really what that is, because he's of the planet Saturn, really it's the kings are associated with the Sephiroth. So really that king is supposedly associated with Bina. So you probably get where I'm going with this, is that if you want to, you could call upon each of the individual kings and say, yo, don't say yo, but you know what I mean. You could say to them, hey, I would like an easier ride through the Aethers, or could you please give me some wisdom about each of the aspects that you entail with this? So could you please help me out as I'm going through what I think pretty much everybody who's gone through the Aethers will agree is a very mind expanding experience without the aid of pharmaceuticals that the Aethers are. And it would behoove you to use these kings, and their powers in conjunction with that. So I forget your original question, and I know it's a long aside here, but I think it was about the hexagram rituals and stuff like that. So yes, I would say do that just so you can start to understand the effects of what astrology is. Learn the effects of, start tracking your natal chart, learn this and that. Astro.com's free, astroseek.com's free. I recommend the latter one especially, just because it's got a wide range of features, but at astro.com, it's a standard as well. But at any rate, you can really start to understand what a planet is and what it's about, what its influence is a lot better if you start actually drawing that in. Or when you banish stuff, this was a mistake I made for a long time, and it took me like a decade or so to realize I really was going the wrong way with this, but I kind of followed the modern Magic Donald Michael Craig route with this. I was banishing way too much. And the problem with that is that the thing I tell newer magicians is when you're banishing, you're literally pushing things away, saying, get away from me. Nothing wrong with that. I like my personal space. What was that? I think it was a Rick and Morty episode, interdimensional cable, stay away from my personal space, blah, blah, blah. Nothing wrong with that, but you can't, you also can't, you lose the opportunity to understand what's going on as much when you're shoving everything away as when you're pulling everything close to you. Right. So really, I think those who are following more of a Golden Dawn approach, I'm not in the Golden Dawn, I don't speak for them, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of modern magic is, if you've read it, really what the goal is, I think it ought to be, is fine tuning what this and that thing feels like. Sure. And so if you want to know what Earth energy feels like, learn how to invoke Earth. If you want to know what Venus energy feels like, learn how to invoke Venus. If you want to know what Yesod energy feels like, invoke Yesod. And I'll just shout out to Scott Stenwick again. He's got a lot of great stuff on his website to do just that, to actually invoke the Sephiroth as well. But yeah, I do recommend figuring that out, learning how to do it. Just because, and like I said, I think the kings using the kings in conjunction with that. But no, I don't I don't really do that anymore. I think I'm just pretty close to the angels that it's like, I mean, I could do that if I really wanted to juice something up, but I just say they got this.
Okay, yeah, very good, very good. What do you see? What differences do you see working with like the planetary angels of like the Heptameron? Say you're working with Zadkiel for Jupiter for Thursday, right? Versus the Heptarchia. Have you noticed any big differences, or is it? Do you see the Heptarchia angels as being sort of like a stronger,
So,
quicker? Maybe
I'm so
share some results as well, because that might be interesting too.
sure. So can you remind me what we're comparing? I think you cut out a little bit there. So
Oh,
the
just
Heptarchia,
like the typical planetary angels that people work with, you know.
oh, okay, like the spirit intelligences and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, spirit
Yeah,
intelligences, and exactly.
yeah. I would say that for me, like the thing about Enochian is high investment, high reward. So you absolutely can get results using other systems. You know, I'm right now, obviously, you know, I'm almost 4 straight years into this now of working Enochian on some level or other. So I've invested a lot into it. So it'll be a pretty easy go-to if I know, you know, if I want to have something, that'll be an easier way to think about it. But yeah, I've, you know, just using the planetary intelligence and, you know, the spirit of, let's say, Mercury, for example, just getting back to illness and stuff like that. There was a coworker, and I'm trying to, the spouse of a coworker who I did a ritual for healing, and I'll just leave it at that. And I won't say when I did it, where I did it, blah blah blah. But this was something that I also actually did with a fellow magician. We'll talk about it off the air about who that was, but it was something that actually kept the situation that was already bad from getting much worse. So now, of course, the doctors and nurses had a lot to do with that, and way more than I did as a, you know, as a magician. So I don't want to take, you know, too much credit, but I also don't want to take credit away from the spirits that and what they did, you know, in terms of helping that coworker's spouse's condition improve. Now, that being said, you know, I would say that you're getting results either way. But what I've found is like, you know, I didn't need to go down the line of correspondences as much. And I already had, you know, I already have what I have to work with that. But I would say that, you know, other practitioners have worked with, I'm trying to remember the Olympic spirits, and they've worked with Enochian, and then they've found that the angels in Enochian say, instead of working with me, work with the Olympic spirits. And I think there's not as much hostility, obviously, you know, with the Buddhist practice that I have going on, that you have going on. I think that we've realized that what Frater R.C. says, that, you know, spirit recognizes spirit. I don't think that there's as much of a, I mean, sometimes there is conflict, you know, quote unquote, but I think that for the most part, you know, you're going to get results if you have a good sense of what you're doing. And I've had good results when it comes to healing or mitigating bad situations. I've had times where, you know, right now, for example, I've done a working with the Jupiter King and Prince in the Enochian Heptarchy, and so far so good. It seems to be working out. We won't know until it's done, right? But, you know, I've also done deity workings, you know, before I was, you know, solely focused on Enochian, where, for example, I did a Jupiter invocation, and I was able to leverage that to my benefit financially. So all of these things, you know, hey, I mean, these different things work. I don't want to say that it won't. It's just that with Enochian, once you put in the overhead for the Heptarchy, you can get all these wonderful other things that can go with that. That's why I say Enochian can sort of leverage itself in a bunch of different directions.
Yeah, it's a very good system to work with if you're already obviously getting into Enochian, right? Like it's such an investment to get the furniture and the, you know, it's a huge process, and there's a lot of study you have to do, a lot of things to prepare. Whereas perhaps say you're working with, like you said, invoking Jupiter or working with the Olympian spirit, sorry, from the Arbitel. It's a lot simpler. Like all you really need is maybe some incense, a sigil, some basic understanding. You know, whereas like with the Enochian, you need if you're gonna, I mean, if you're gonna go full fledged, right? You're gonna need the ring. You're gonna need a lamp. You're gonna need a table. You're gonna need to know what you're doing. It's almost like not to say one is necessarily better than the other, but it's like algebra versus calculus or something. There's a lot more formulaic understanding, that you need to go through.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. I think the angels who came through, they really were. It's this higher dimensional stuff. This is like it's a lot, but learning it, it's almost like, okay, you want to make the varsity team. This is what you got to do.
Right.
You want to make the Olympic trials. Okay, this is what you got to do if you want to do that. But on the other hand, it's kind of like I said, high investment, high reward. You get more out of that. And on the other thing too is like with Enochian, really all you need just to start and make sure you're okay is like do the usual, be a good person, try to make sure you're doing right, with staying on the straight and narrow for at least a little while, and making sure your heart's in it and that sort of thing. And then just read the call to text. Do you need the furniture? You really should have it, ideally, but you're gonna get something. And if it doesn't happen, try reading again. I usually, just try it out, try it a second time and third time. And then if it doesn't work after 3 times, just stop. And then try it again in like a day or 2 or a week or something like that. And then once you get that thing, then obviously the angel's like, okay, good job, little pat on the head, good job, for making that first step after the starting gun. And now here's what you need to do to get the rest of them. But yeah, I think one of the Olympic spirits, I think it was the spirit oak, actually showed up in one of the Dean Kelly scrying sessions. So I think, like I said, I think there's, I mean, I'm not an expert in grimoire magic, I'm just like, okay, well, that's interesting, so does this mean that they completely approve of this or they want you to do that? I have no idea. This is the fun part. This is where it's like you get to research it, you get to try stuff out, it's wild. It's a wild universe. And like the different things that I've noticed getting into it is like, okay, I was not expecting to have a whole different table with whole different ensigns on top of that, but I realized, okay, they're leveraging what I know about astrology on top of so like the Dean Kelly original table, that's mainly planetary / Sephirotic, but and they also left this clue about zodiacal kings, and then it just turned out that they're like, okay, this is the way it could work, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I got this whole extra set of tools that other people can, that I use, that other people can use if they want to try it, if they're so inspired, stuff like that. I really think, Ryan, just to be honest with you about Enochian, it's like, I think what's happening is that we're starting to get, I don't know if we're getting to this critical mass, I'm sensing it though, of people who are like getting to the limits of that system, and then who are like extending it out in various ways, whether that means finding linkages between the existing information, there's one person, I forget his name, Daniel, I want to say, Daniel Rection, maybe. I forget his last name exactly. He was on Magic Without Fears, I think it is. That's Frater RC's podcast, where he was talking about, more galactic oriented Enochian. I say, ooh, that's interesting, and I like learning about that and seeing where people take it. But I think there's enough people now who are like trying to round out a very rough thing that Dean Kelly pretty much only had patience for a little while. And I gotta say, especially reading some of those old diaries and just how frustrated Kelly gets. At one time he's given this book that he has to read, or that they have to do in addition to Loga, and he just says, I know what to do with it, and the end, burn it. And I just had to laugh. I'm like, wow,
You got a real sarcastic guy on there. You're
Right.
working with it, John D. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling.
No, that's okay. I mean, it was pretty intense what they're going through a lot of the
Oh
time.
yeah,
You know, it's like
yeah,
seems like Kelly was kind of burnt out, and it's like, oh,
yeah, and
more. I got to keep going.
and
Overdrive, overtime,
yeah.
overtime,
Come
over.
on, bro. Come on, keep it going. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
no
yeah.
and I think about it, it's like the insane amount of stuff that they had to do. So they did a lot. They did pretty much about the maximum that they could do given who they were, the times they were living in.
Mhm.
And it's not like they had, therapy back then.
Sure. What's interesting about Enochian, though, it is, as you mentioned, there's so much. It is a full system. Obviously, we're missing some parts of it. That's why there's so many different people trying to fill in different blanks that are missing and things along those lines. But ultimately, it is its own sort of full system, right? Like you have the results, you have the theurgy, you have
Mhm.
planetary, zodiacal, sephirotic, elemental. Basically, everything is included in it, right? It's
Yeah, I mean,
magic. Uh-huh.
I'm trying to think about what in the Western magical tradition isn't in there. And
Yeah.
I can't think of anything. And the fact I've been able to use um, some of the, and I think this is just, based because I had at least, something of a Buddhist background before I got into it. And so I've been trying to extend it that way in terms of getting some, the idea of like the emptiness, the concept of Buddhist emptiness, using Enochian for that. And I've gotten results. Um, and so I can't think of anything that in the Western tradition that isn't inherently in there. And the thing that always excited me about it, once I started getting more into it, was trying to extend it and use it something of as a bridge to some of these Eastern ideas, especially Buddhism in particular, because the language itself is it's not limited that much. Like if is there a concept you want to have? Do you want to have the idea of empty mind? Well, guess what? The words empty and mind are literally translatable out of Enochian. So you want to compose a prayer for that? Why not? Give it a shot, see what goes on.
Right.
You obviously want to phrase that carefully, but I think it's almost like I view like a lot of what goes on in Buddhism, and especially the real esoteric Buddhism, and what goes on with Enochian. It's almost like what their background and foreground to each other. So it's interesting, kind of having a foot in both worlds at this point. I don't
Right.
know what your experience is. You can probably speak more to that too.
Well, do you ever see any? Well, in what ways do they inform each other, or in what ways, if any, is there conflict? Because
Yeah, I
there's
mean,
approaches where you're like you're switching paradigms, right? Sort of like a chaos magician.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
doing one thing and you're in, this realm, and then you fully pull out, right? Versus,
yep.
doing this is the only right one and this is the only right one, and they're conflicting. So kind of maybe you can share a little bit about that, or also how maybe one has informed or modified or enlightened another practice, perhaps.
Yeah, well, I guess this is I know that I would say that one of the things with Buddhism is that it's still like, especially in the Vajrayana, I'll stick with the Vajrayana
Okay.
context because I think that's closer to both of our lanes, although we could probably speak more generally about Eightfold Noble Path and all of that. But the interesting thing is that they have deities and they use deities, but they're essential, what's the word I'm looking for? They're inherent, they're empty of inherent existence, right? Or they're just a rising phenomenon, but you still use them because they're good for something kind of special. And it's kind of like they kind of ride that line, don't they? It's there, but it's But it's funny that and I was just reading and I'll name drop Aaron Leach again. I was just reading the Enochian Saga. I just bought his book, and it's actually kind of an underrated book, so I want to recommend that before.
Which book is this?
This is the Enochian Saga. So he actually wrote this as it's a guidebook that he wrote for only himself as he was writing the Angelical Language volumes 1 and 2. He was trying to just get a sense of what was going on with these two guys as they were getting this transmission. And he starts it out in 1583. And I also have Skinner's diaries from that time, so I can read the general context of what Aaron Leach has, and then, you know, but as far as the 16th century politics, I don't really need to worry too much about that. But just getting into that, there's this one passage that he quotes in there about Raphael talking about God, but using the word nothing, you know, and like, nothing, you know, that is not a Christian, you know. God is everything and everywhere. He is omni, you know, he is omni-man, but not in the cartoon Invincible, you know, he's not that. He's omni, he's like this. And it was weird hearing this out of Raphael. And you realize, okay, wait a minute, this is sort of like, you know, if we're going to use the closest Western term we can, this is like Ein, you know, the Kabbalistic idea of nothing, you know, this world of Adam Kadmon, where, you know, there's this apparent nothingness, and then out of that comes, you know, this limitlessness, and then limitless light, and then finally we get into, you know, this world, out of the world of Adam Kadmon and into the world of emanations, blah blah blah, depending on what, you know, Kabbalistic model you follow. And there are probably more models available there than I care to get into. But at the same time, you know, you can think about, like, you know, when you really get deep into those meditative states, you know, and you've definitely shared plenty with me offline, that are very helpful, very calm, very like, just, it's tough to put these things into words, just like it is discussing these, you know, higher realm states in Kabbalah, or in Enochian for that matter. But it's there's like this same level of stillness. And actually it's funny, I scried little today. That was one of the things I did before I hopped on here. And there was this line, and it was, the angels actually gave it to me in German. It was Allfarb kommt aus den Ruhe. And I was worried that the grammar was wrong, you know, but it actually was okay, because my German is like, kind of rusty. But and that means that that all color, or the all color, you know, but it's really just all color, like that, a single word, like in the All Father, you know, comes out of peace. And it made me realize it's just like, there's that same idea of like this emanation that's coming out of this just inherent stillness and emptiness, and that everything else is just like an arising out of that. And if you think about it, like if you were to like get very scientific or just drill down, it's just some equation, man, or it's just some like hyper complex, but really all of those rules could just be anything. We're just dealing with the fact that they are how they are. And, you know, now it's way different from how we thought it would probably be. You know, it could have been, you know, what's that Dave Matthews, you know, line? It was, could I have been anyone other than me, you know? Well, yeah. And that's, you know, if you think about that, you can go down the shadow route very quickly. But anyway, there's nothing inherently saying that things have to be how they are, or that things tomorrow have to be a certain way. I mean, there kind of is, but there kind of isn't. And it's in that middle space that we human beings get to work with. But just appreciating that level of openness to possibility, and to working with both within limits, but it, you know, with how things are, but also how they could be. That I think that's where that inherent idea of emptiness and stillness and all of that, I think that's where those two things inform each other. So that's a long-winded way of answering that, but
no,
you know,
for sure. I think
that's what podcasts are for, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're looking, like, the person I've seen that's reconciled these the most has been David Heim Smith. If you read his work, because he's really deep into both worlds, into Vajrayana as well as Kabbalah, especially traditional Jewish Kabbalah, right? And he like all the language that you use, like Ein Sof and all the different Sephirotic levels, he really combines into the sort of Dzogchen Vajrayana view.
Yes,
and
I need to get into him. I've heard him. I'm like very much a fan of his, and I just keep putting it off. But
no,
you know, once more time opens up. But I got I can't believe I have another Enochian thing I'm doing. I can't, it's like I have another Enochian project. They keep on tapping me on the shoulder saying, you got one more thing.
Right.
So it's like, what was that? It wasn't Uncle Leo. It was one of Jerry Seinfeld's other uncles on the show where he's like, you still got that pen, the one that writes upside down, just constantly reminding you, I still got this, you got this other thing. So
Right. Yeah, definitely. I got to check out his new books too. His latest one is about the clip off, and he relates that to the kleshas in Buddhism, and sort of how they're sort of shells, or they're sort of these packages that once you release them, you sort of enter the clear light, or the Ein Sof, right? So it's a whole, like he said, it's like his craziest, most in-depth, complex book out so far. So definitely got to get into that.
Yeah, I need to get into that just because, and definitely while he's still, walking the earth. I think he predicted about when he was going to die in a couple episodes ago, podcast episodes ago. So
right,
I'm like, man, I gotta get in while before the fire sale starts.
While the getting's good. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, while the getting's good. So
exactly. All right, to transition a little bit to, you had mentioned several times about like Enochian channeling, right? So what do you mean when you say Enochian? Are you talking about evocation, or is there another process that you're using?
Yeah, so
yeah.
So the idea, I've been a fan of, I'll just of Lee Harris. I'm just going to name drop as many people as I can, of Lee Harris. He's somebody who I just really enjoy listening to, his energy updates, all of that. It's funny sometimes listening to him and saying, did you just have an astrologer tell you that? Because that's what, but I think there's a whole other level of intentionality going on there. So I love working with the angels, and I think that sometimes just sitting back and listening and kind of reflecting on not only what they're trying to tell you right now, but also what's coming up. They do have a lot to say, and I think it would be unwise to not listen to a being, especially a being who's of an entirely different class than you are, because maybe they will teach you something. So, but sometimes, usually when I get into trance, what I will do is I will be just sort of, I always record these on my iPhone. So I'm really making somebody who's not even born yet's future, very painful, because I intend to hire somebody at some point to just help like write all of this out into, and have a documentation of all this stuff for people to go back to. Because I think that's a good thing to have for your practice, and at least try to pull together some different sources so that people can understand just what was going on and why and all of that. But at any rate, that's far afield. But anyway, when I go into trance, I'll record it on the iPhone. And usually when it came to the aethers, I would just say, okay, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what sometimes it's a specific angel who's telling me something. Sometimes I just get the sense the angels are saying this, blah, blah, blah. And I'll just say I'll just report. It's like, I'm a reporter with the microphone, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just saying, here's what I'm saying. And sometimes I will get a message that's very direct. Sometimes what I'll find is there were times when I was starting out with Enochian where the first time through the aethers, specifically, I should say, not first starting out, but returning to it after a years-long hiatus. What I would find is that my energy level wasn't, tuned up well enough that the angels still had something to say. And I would be like, okay, well, I'll let you say it because I don't know what's going on here, blah, blah, blah. And they would just boom, drop me down out of consciousness and speak through me. And then after that, I would find myself very tired and I would just need to go to bed afterwards. So that was like literally a channeling experience of the angel wanting to say something through me. And sometimes that will happen occasionally when I like to just, my preferred thing is to re-scry Lil. And so I did the Aether of Lil. And so I did that tonight. And, then I got, that's when the divine, itself will channel straight through you. And, if you're not energetically changed a little bit after that, then you must be, an ascended master or something like that. But at any rate, so that's my experience of like what can come through, what can be channeled, just using Enochian proper. But I was kind of curious about like, is there a way to get a message, you know, that might be more relevant for folks, you know, just living their day-to-day lives, but you still want it to be divine? I was like, I was thinking about how to make that happen. So what I realized is, well, you could probably, you know, use the highest aether and the lowest aether and sort of combine those energies. So it's like, I'm going to go, you know, beyond the abyss, and I'm also going to be right close to, you know, the physical plane. I'm going to use both those energies, and I'm going to say, like, I'm going to approach this. You know, this is much more, you know, I'm going to approach this with a model and say, I'm going to, and then reverse engineer what I would like to happen. And please, angels, do not get mad at me for trying to do this. But you know what I'm saying. I mean, this is the kind of thing. I'm a little bit of a mad scientist and they knew who they were getting involved with when they were reaching out to me. I'm joking, of course. I'm being a little facetious, but you know, I think the angels who I've worked with have developed a sense of humor about me, if you know, in a manner of speaking. So anyway, the whole idea is that, okay, you know, this physical, you know, there's that phrase, the cobs is in the coup and the coup in the, you know, vice versa. And and you get this in, you know, more Eastern traditions, you know, this reconciliation between heaven and earth, and of course in the Western as well. And so I realized, well, you got this aether that's really close to the divine, and you got this aether that's really close to the mundane world. Why not sort of approach it about calling the aether that's closest to the divine within the one that's closest to earth, and then vice versa, the one that's closest to earth within them, and just call on both of those. And I forget the exact technique. I'm sure I have it on a blog post on my website, Enochian.today. I guess I'll mention that. But the whole idea there is to have use that first. Or you know, you can, if you know how to scry the aethers, you can scry both of those aethers, scry text, scry lil, and then go forward with that technique. But the main idea is to get that I had when I was starting this out, and it's still kind of in beta. I was tempted to do that tonight, but I realized I probably wouldn't have time. But to try to see if something can come forward that both has a very high, you know, energetic signature, like very close to the divine, but also can be impactful to people who are here on Earth and who may have never heard an angel come forward or something like that. And when I've done that, I realized that there was a problem, and that was that I needed to turn off my conscious mind. And I was not being very good about doing that. So I think I had to come up with a prayer to please, let my mind be, you know, or have my own, I think I phrased it was somewhere along the lines of like, let my mind or my own voice be quiet so that this other thing can come through. That was the whole idea behind it. So after doing that, then all of a sudden, okay, I can channel, because Cliff needs to shut up and he needs to go ahead and make space for this other voice to come through. So that's what happened. And I found there was an angel named Tetranos who has come through and spoken, you know, fairly poetic, you know, messages. I haven't done that in a while. I should get back into that. I've been trying to, you know, I've got a lot of things, you know, spinning plates as it were, but I think that's one of the things, besides, you know, doing the Book of Silvered Leaves, that's again out of the diaries, trying to complete that. I think that's on my agenda. I got a lot of like little things. I want to put Enochian into the International Phonetic Alphabet and all of that. A lot of little ideas, you know, to like ways to like make Enochian more accessible, and also to you know, I don't know, man, live life. It's crazy. And also my own personal practice. You got to do it all at once.
Yeah, exactly. You did also share a holy table top that you sort of like redesigned, right? With like zodiacal. Is there any way, do you have a an image copy of that on your computer? that you could share?
Let me see. Yeah, I'll pull it up here. 1 second.
Okay.
But yeah, let me. I'll
That'd be
talk about it.
interesting to chat about. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think I posted. If anybody is watching this, and obviously continue to watch the episode throughout, because this is the podcast that's a place to be, right? No, don't ever change the channel. Always. And
Well, you do have a blog post on it, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
But I've been mixing stuff up here, and let me find the easiest one for people to. I think I made copies here.
Okay.
I'm being a little overly facetious tonight, so I apologize
Oh,
to
no,
anybody who may be offended. But I'll go ahead and plop this into Paint, just so that it's even easier to see.
Also, you should be able to share too. I just
yeah. Let me zoom in a little bit more. I just want to make sure that it's going to show up as well as it can. Here's what. This will be okay. Yeah. So this is the latest version, and I'll go ahead and share, because sharing is caring. All right, so I plopped this into Paint. There's a better version of this that actually is in Excel that I have on my website. So this is the zodiacal table that sort of came to me. Now, this is going to look fairly familiar. It's got pretty much the exact same format as far as the outside goes. You get the 21 letters on each side. Rather than the letter Pa at the corners, which is Enochian letter B, I put the Enochian letter T in the corners, because the angels have like to say the first shall be last, last shall be first. B is the first letter of the Enochian alphabet, so I put T in these corners. And that's the only reason that I have for putting that in there. Besides the fact that the reason why in the original D and Kelly table, you all of the kings and princes had their names start with the letter B. But this is actually based on the zodiacal kings, and to my knowledge, there were no zodiacal princes, but it's possible that material was lost. But what I did with this is I arranged the zodiacal kings in zodiacal order, and using the exact same method, except I think I had to do a 90-degree rotation or something like that. But using the exact same order that the kings and princes had their letters distributed on the original holy table, I went ahead and made this one, which has the exact same letters, and they're distributed throughout. I'll just call attention really quickly here to this AVAA in English letters. For whatever reason, that shows up twice on this table, and that shows up once in the planetary table. So it's possible that that's in Enochian word, or has some additional significance. So that's the outside. This inner part here, I'll get to these corners in a second. Actually, no, I'll do it right now. So these corners here that I have in blue and red, the only reason I have them in blue and red is because those were the colors on the original table that Dee and Kelly, when they didn't want to make the ensigns, they were like, can we please just paint this on there? And the angel said, okay, fine, but here's how you got to do that. So that's the only reason I have those, the outlines here. But these are derived from the actual watchtowers, and that's also the reason for this color association, is just because I figured you could probably make a nice cube at the end of the day that incorporated the watchtowers if you had this zodiacal table, then the original planetary table, and then used all four sides of those watchtowers there. But at any rate, it was pretty much every other letter. So just really quickly, I'll just give you the very bare bones version of this. I went into vision. I talked with King Karmara, Hagunel, and Galva, and they said, okay, if you want to have zodiacal ensigns, because it became clear to me that I needed zodiacal ensigns, that's a good thing, that you will get more power and it will be much more stable, and that's what I found when I scried tonight. But you need to go to the watchtowers for that. And they said, okay, this one will come from the fire tablet, this one will come from the air, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the
names that are here on the inside, this actually will probably look familiar to people who are who have done Enochian and are familiar with the Sigillum Dei Ameth. So that is that initial seal. It's got the beautiful heptagram on the outside. So it was clear to me, and you know, this was not a smooth Cliff just kind of got it all in one go. There was a lot of, okay, this seems right. What do I think about this? And then of course, how do I get the right answer? I have to go back to the angels, and the angels are like, okay, here's how you do it. But what these names within each of these triangles on the outer part are derived from is actually the these three names per element of the watchtowers. So you get, for example, Oro, Iba, Aospi, etc. You know,
three
Empire,
divine names.
Yeah, per watchtower tablet.
Right.
Yeah, so if you take all of those together, it occurred to me, well, that's 48 letters. That's nice. And then I also said, well, what else do I know that has this? Well, the SDA, if you go around the outside and you do all of the archangel names, they're actually only 48 letters, and then the last one is a cross. And so you get, with that, I said, the Karmara says, okay, here's where you put the cross. You put it right here at the end of this name. So these are just remixed names that are being put along the outside in a more, you know, septenary, a 7-based format. And then they are literally, I mean, these are names of God. It's just that they're derived from the watchtower tablets, and that there are 7 of them. And it's just like, you know how Enochian likes to remix stuff and you know, re-scramble stuff, but this was the one that had basically has, like, you know, for lack of a better term, the highest vibration. And then in the middle, just to again parallel the planetary table, you have the hexagon, and then I have the letter L in the middle, meaning the first, but also a parallel, of course, to the Hebrew name for God, the letter L. So this is what, now I'm sure a question the listener may have is, okay, well, what would you use this for?
Right. Yeah. I was
right.
just gonna ask that.
Yeah. So so what I realized that probably the first thing to use this for is to reconcile yourself with your zodiacal chart, you know, which is to say your natal chart. So if there's a part of you that is not well balanced or integrated or something like that, and let's say you're into astrology and, oh, you know, let's say my finances are not doing well. Well, you could probably use this to call on the zodiacal angel that is associated, dependent, you know, there are different house systems, but let's say you're using a whole sign house system. You know, you could call upon that zodiacal angel a little bit more easily if you were to use this table. And so you could find that sign, look up the sign associated with that zodiacal sign. So let's say, like, my second house is Virgo, so you could look up the zodiacal angel for, and I don't have them memorized. I mean, you could give me the name and I could tell you whether or not it was one, but I don't remember which one is which sign. But anyway, you could use this to call upon that angel. So my guess is I would probably do the exact same thing, use calls 1 and 2, use and then just do either an impromptu prayer, or you could do you know, a call to King Marmara, that form of Karmara, and say, you know, yo, don't say yo. You could say, could you please bring forward this angel associated with my second house? And if there are problems with finances for you, then all of a sudden that could help you get reconciled. And so what I did with this for myself was I asked for some assist for just, I asked all of the zodiacal kings, can you please help me be more balanced, you know, or I don't think the balance was the word I used. I think reconciled was the word I used, and rectified. And the way that they came forward, the effects that I've had, I don't want to get too into this because it does touch on, you know, a lot. But what I found, but those who are sort of capable of inferring and understanding what astrology is and how this would actually manifest will understand it. the idea is that what I've found, the actual effects in doing that are that it actually called in an astrological influence or correspondence known as Antisha and Contra Antisha, which is basically, it's kind of a funny way of saying if you fold your natal chart in half, then you're getting the mirror image of that across that line. And it's a specific line. It's the equinox line and the solstice line. And I found that that has happened. So there it is. So it's been interesting. It's been, you know, and it's definitely helped my personal development. So that's what you could use it for.
Okay, where are you getting the zodiacal kings from? People were probably asking that because we haven't. Really
I think it's. I want to say it's Sloan manuscript 3191 is where I could be wrong about that, but it's one of the Sloan.
Oops. No. We froze. Dang it. Ah. Oh. Well. Well, looks like the internet went out. So.
Yep.
Oh man.
But we're back.
Yeah,
we're back.
Well, the recording
so
safe, I would imagine. Jeez, I hope so.
Yeah, if not, I guess we'll have to do a round 2. But
yeah, it should be. Anyway, we left off on Zodiacal Kings. Actually, right?
Yes. So the Zodiacal Kings, they're in the original D manuscripts. So either Sloan 3188, 3189, or 3191. I do remember it was a Sloan, or I could be wrong. It could be in the Cotton appendices. Just if you go to the Fergoff website, PHERGOPH, they are there, but they are listed, and there's, well, at any rate, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but they're all there, and each of them, with the exception of one, and actually I forgot to mention, that's part of the reason why I have the letter L in the middle, is that all of the Zodiacal Kings have a 7-letter name, which is not surprising because Enochian has such a 7-based system, except for one, which is the King of Capricorn, whose name is Levevoth. But it was and it was almost funny watching that, looking at those manuscripts, because it was almost like D hated to have to write that letter H at the end. Now, it was funny. It's like you could tell he just was like, okay, I'll write that, but I'll write it small. And it was weird to me. I'm like, well, why is that? And it may have been Aaron Leach, but I don't want to, ascribe something to him to be sure. But his view was that maybe it was like the letter, whoever it was. I don't want to say it was him necessarily, but they argued that it was like the letter Tav in Hebrew, or Tau, where it should just be the letter T, and that TH, it's just, it should just be elided as the letter T, and don't worry about that. But that didn't sit very well with me, and it's like, I think that actually should be the letter H. Let me actually just lop that off, and then put that in the center of that zodiacal table. By the way, there's also a zodiacal lamen that I made that was in conjunction with that. Same way I made the table. You just use all the same letters and you arrange them around the same way. And with that zodiacal lamen, I also put the letter L in the middle there.
Okay. I was going to ask you too, this is kind of a little side tangent, but the 91 governors who are aethers, those also have astrological, some people say they're related to like working with astrological correspondences as well. Do you agree, or do you have any experience with the governors and their astrological correspondences?
Yeah, I'm not going to weigh in on that. I know that people have looked at, this is sort of where I'm not sure where D ends and Enochian
begins, but D was kind of a politically minded man, and he was also a cartographer. So, but yeah, the 91 governors are associated with parts of the earth, and you know, each one with a different part of the earth. To answer that question, I would guess that it's I will. Each of those governors is associated also with one of the 12 zodiacal kings. So the zodiacal kings show up more than once, according in the Aethers. And interestingly, they show up in a way that, you know, winds up to total this. I'll just say in an astrologically significant way. And I wrote up this article. I put it on my. It was posted in the journal Telecom, thanks to some help of some pretty good editors. But I also reprinted that on my blog, so people can find it. It's a relatively recent post. Yeah, those. So to answer your question, I think I mean, clearly they're associated with the zodiacal king. As to whether or not their influence is strictly astrological, I'm really not sure. I mean, I'll take a really quick step back here about like the Aethers and the governors and what's astrological, what isn't. So, you know, if you think about it, really, the zodiac, the ecliptic, all that stuff, all you're saying is I'm going to extend myself out like a sphere, and I'm going to make like little orange slices of that, and I'm going to have
Oh man. What is going on here? Jeez.
Oh, I can hear you. There you go.
Oh,
you're back.
Yeah. Ooh.
I can
Major
stop.
difficulties here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just really quickly. So if you extend that out, I promise I will learn how to be brief. I'm like Polonius and Hamlet. I got to stop. So anyway, there are those 12 zodiacal signs, and you're basically, if you extend yourself out in all directions in the universe, as you know, let's say you could do that in a perfectly balanced way, like a sphere that extended out. Each of those 12 signs, once you've reconciled with all 12 of those signs, you're reconciling yourself with the universe, right? If you're just taking a strictly directional approach. So if you figure that you're doing that pretty well, you know, from a zodiacal point of view, then, you know, things start to click into place. Oh, there are 30 Aethers. Well, there are 30 degrees to the zodiac. So maybe every time I scry an Aether, I'm actually rectifying myself with 12 degrees of the zodiac, 1 degree for each of the 12 signs. You know, and it doesn't really matter what time you were born if you think about it in that way, because really at the end of the day, you could say, you know, I'm doing an astrological wheel, you know, that's usually the way that it's, you know, like if you go to astro.com and you print out your natal chart, blah, 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 that's the way it's done nowadays. But if you were to extend that in 3 dimensions, you're just taking that orange sliced wedge, and you know, that's how much I'm taking one little teeny, you know, slice of that wedge, et cetera, et cetera. So really, in a lot of ways, I would say that the power of what the Aethers are, I would be hard pressed to find something that, in terms of human consciousness and what you are getting yourself on board with, is anything larger, that is anything much smaller, let's put it that way, than reality itself. The human mind can only imagine so much, but you are literally rectifying yourself and your consciousness with reality in a very hardcore, almost really difficult to describe way, because once you hit a certain point, you're going beyond, you know, this is all Kabbalistic talk, but you're going beyond the abyss, you're getting up into these these supernal realms. And but really what is supernal is really just a full integration of a lot of realms that, you know, usually, you know, if I were to put this in an astrological interpretation, I'd say that's 12th house, that's bad spirit. I don't want to think about that. That's bad mind. That's a part I don't want to get into. Nope, we're going to do that with the Aethers. We're going to make sure that you're reconciled with that as well. And that's why it's so powerful, is like there's nowhere to hide in them. You know, it's all the lousy BS narratives, as I've explained to, you know, somebody who I'm recently, you know, guiding through some of the aethers. It's undoing a lot of those narratives and learning how to integrate that with yourself. And they're having some problems, and it's just how it goes, you know, but you got to do it. And keeping in mind, this is somebody with zero other magical expertise. So it's like, okay, if you want to do it, we'll do it. We got the tools. We have the tools. We have the technology. We can do it. To quote a very old TV show, $6 Million Man, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. What is interesting, you did mention that the aethers and the governors, there's associations with parts of the earth, and that's like something that's less explored, right? There's not that much information on it. There's not many people have put out much experimentation or work on that. I know that Scott Stenswick mentioned that he's working on a book. He's been working on it for quite a while. You know, it's been mentioned on his blog several times for several years. But kind of curious where that's going to go. He's the only one I've seen that's like mentioned writing some material on that. So
he really is quite masterful. You know, I think pretty much everybody who I've mentioned on this is masterful. So I want to give credit where it's due. But yeah, I mean, I will say, you know, other Enochian practitioners who, you know, they will get very interested, let's put it that way, in those parts of Earth, and maybe I could have some political influence and blah blah blah. And you know, that's certainly something Dee was interested in. But I'm at least heartened by the fact that that can be pulled in a bunch of different directions, and you know, there's not just one person who would have something like that and trying to do that. At least maybe their influences would cancel each other out. Or at least, or maybe they would all angels towards what we hope is something better. But yeah, that is something technical. I know that, and this is strictly deep beta in terms of beta testing. I'm not sure about this, but I did. Who's the person who originally transmitted the parts of Earth to DNA. 120 in all, or 121. So
ooh, breaking up.
Remaining 30. And I got some, I think I only went for governors' names. I didn't go for the actual parts of Earth that they were associated with. But somebody actually in the comments section, I forget who it was, but he pointed me to Josephus. So I have not followed up on that because life and all of that, but definitely credit to that person. You know, I'll probably DM.
Oh, come on. Oh, we keep breaking up, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's all right.
Let's see. Oh, let's see. Wonder if I switch again. Hold on. I'm trying to switch internet again. Switch routers. Let's see. Okay, hopefully this is better. Yeah, it was breaking up pretty bad, unfortunately.
Okay.
But
no worries.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Yeah, we're just talking about the parts of the Earth and the governors. I have this book here. I don't know if you can see it. It's
Athena Wallander's book.
Yeah, and it's actually quite interesting because she, in this book, hold on a second. You can see. I don't know if you can actually see on the camera here, but just breaks down. You have the Aether, the governor, and then the sigil, astrological sign, and then part of the Earth, right? So like Egypt.
This would not be a true Enochian. You know, this would not be a true Enochian. Yeah, that's good. Just hold it. Yeah, that's good. Okay. I do know what you're talking. I've seen something very similar in Lon Milo Duquette's book. So, you know, whether it's Athena Wallander's book, she's obviously got a lot of expertise. I've, chatted with her here or there on, I think, a Facebook group. Very knowledgeable.
But yeah, it's funny to me that it's like you cannot have a true Enochian learning session without a table.
Right.
Because it's how it is. It's like everything's associated with something else, you know.
Right.
And it's kind of the nature of what it is. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, there are. So I'll just recap this in case you edit it together however you want. But basically, there were 91 governors associated with parts of the Earth,
Mhm.
and Edward Kelly actually, and I'm rereading the diaries. I've reread this part.
I have to do this part quick because I'm worried.
Maybe the angels don't want us talking about the parts of the Earth. Who knows? You know.
That's kind of interesting. When we get to the parts of the Earth, it's like nope.
Nope.
And then Stenwick's been working on that book for years, and it just never comes out. So I wonder if there's some.
Yeah, angels got their own influence, right?
Yeah, some scrambling going on.
Yeah, it's got to come in the appointed time. So hey,
Scrambling the Zoom, scrambling the publication.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief because I think I'm not sure, but I'll just leave it at this. The angels were supposed to delivered 91, but there's supposed to be another 30, and they never completed that. And it was due to Edward Kelly's objections, and he thought something hinky was going on. And so I did actually work with the Angel Nalvaj. Another 30 governors' names were transmitted to me. This is strictly deep beta. I don't claim to be the best scryer in the world. So if somebody else, wants to attempt those, to verify those in their own personal practice, that's fine. I put up a blog post about that. But I'm not about, calling on angels to have, I think I've learned my lesson about using magic for political ends. So I think we're, you kind of got to take a step back and be a little bit more humble. Now, if you're the last person on Earth, maybe getting the parts of the Earth right is more important. But who knows? The angels did say use magic, and maybe the collective attempts / mistakes will all add up to something better in the end, God willing. So.
Well, then there's the famous story about the what is it? The Spanish, the Armada.
Yeah, that's right.
That's always the most interesting story about one of the interesting stories about the whole saga. Where it's seems like there was some interference going on here.
Yeah, if you talk to King Babalel, who's powerful in waters, and he's like, "Yo, just leave your ships at harbor. It'll be okay. Just leave it at harbor for X amount of time, and then go out and polish off the rest of the armada, because there'll be half of it, the fleet will be sunk."
Right.
If that's all you need to know is just leave them in harbor for a couple days, that was all it took back then. If there was a big storm coming, you didn't need to, and that's the thing. It's like the storm was probably going to come either way, but it's that knowing, okay, don't you go out like they did.
Right.
Yeah, we would certainly be speaking en español if it weren't for that change in history, because that allowed English dominance of the seas.
Yeah, for sure.
So, was it the angels? I don't know. I've heard that's part of it, but I'm not sure.
For sure. Well, I'm kind of worried we're going to get cut off again, but I think we covered pretty much all the stuff I wanted to cover. Working with Heptarchia. Oops. Again. Jeez. What's going on here? All right. Well,
we'll have to try to wrap up again.
We'll have to try to wrap up again, exactly. So I think we covered everything I wanted to cover in this podcast, and Heptarchia, and went on some tangents. But maybe you can share how people can find you and any closing thoughts.
Yeah. So they can get in touch with me through my website, which is Enochian.today. And I'll also give a shout out to my wife's website, digressiongirl.com, if you are interested in comics and all of that. I appreciate your allowing me to do that. Closing thoughts. There is a lot more to be discovered about Enochian. I think when Aaron Leach was on Esoterica with Justin Sledge the other day, he was talking about that, and he's absolutely right. There's an entire field to be learned, not just for on the scholarship side, but really, frankly, from the practitioner side. I think that anybody who gets deep enough into this, the fact that a whole additional table, was, I was inspired, quote unquote, that sometimes it's like a direct transmission. Sometimes it's like you realize in hindsight, okay, that's what was actually happening. They were giving, I got an idea, but really the angels handed it to me. I think that, there's a lot more that this system can be extended. And I hope that people continue doing that. But I think we're getting close to a critical mass of people who are doing all kinds of stuff. And it's good to see. So, but if you're interested in how to go about it, just reach out. Or I think I even have a getting started with Enochian blog post that I'll just probably direct people to. So
yeah, thanks for coming on, and maybe there will be a round 4 someday. We'll figure that
maybe.
one out, We'll come back in a couple years and you'll have your book out on the parts of the earth.
Yes.
The internet won't block us at that time.
Yes, definitely.
Yep. Won't shut us out.
Yep, definitely. Well, thanks so much for having me, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
Most definitely. And then until next time, let's see.